Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lexi Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on. Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. Today I'm here with Joseph Blakeslee, and I'm very excited to speak to Joseph because he reached out to me to talk about his story and the story of their first generation farm and all the stuff that they have going on. You guys are located in New York, and as I understand it, you do some cattle, and then you're also getting ready to open a butcher shop or have opened. How's things going? Tell me where you are and how you got there.
Yeah, so we do a little bit of everything on the farming side. And then we also last year decided to build a custom exempt butcher shop. We got the main shop up and running right in time for deer season last year. And then we decided that wasn't going to be enough room. So we are currently putting another addition on the shop, more than doubling the size to house new coolers, new freezer, and our slaughter floor. So currently dealing with that. And then, the spring rush with just farming in general, putting cows out on pasture and getting fences fixed and piglets. And we've got goats and sheep, chickens, meat chickens. We do meat rabbits. So, all the spring flush of babies coming in gets a little chaotic.
Sounds like plenty to keep you busy then. Goodness, that's a busy spring season if you got that many different species there.
Yeah, we stay plenty busy here.
Awesome. Well, was this always the dream to own a farm and have a butcher shop, or how did things evolve over time?
Yeah, so ever since, young, little guy, anyone would ask me, most kids are like, I want to be a fireman or a police officer, some extravagant job. I just wanted to be a farmer. That was my number one thing in life. I just always, I didn't grow up on a farm. My great grandparents on both sides of my family had farms, but I never grew up around that. I just had a natural draw to the farm. And that's just one thing. I always wanted to have a farm. And then getting into high school, I lived in a very small town. We didn't have we had one stop sign in the whole town. We didn't have stores. We didn't have anything. And the only job you could do was there was a local dairy farm. So I got a job there working with my friends, and we worked pretty much full-time hours through high school, and I loved it. I couldn't trade that job for anything. The bosses were great and stuff. And then I just kind of getting out of high school, I still kept part-time farm jobs. And then in 2015, me and my wife, we bought our first piece of property and started more homesteading than farming. We started out with a few chickens like everybody does. Then we got into dairy goats, started raising pigs, and then we got into meat chickens. And then with that, I wanted to learn how to process my own animals. So I started watching YouTube and just kind of teaching myself the basics. And then a local processor, kind of semi-local to us, was looking for people to come and work. So I applied there. It took a little while to get hired. And then once I got in there, it was a natural passion for the processing side of it. I took really fast to it. And I just really enjoy it. I really enjoy taking that live animal and turning it into really nice, beautiful cuts for people to enjoy. And I left that job a couple of years back and got into a couple of different things, and then was approached by my now business partner about possibly starting a custom exempt shop of our own. And this is where we're at. So I've been doing most of the work Pretty much myself. We hired out some of the steel work and concrete work, but the electrical and plumbing and everything else I've been doing on my own on top of the farm. And then when we first started building this, I had a full-time job also. So, yeah.
That's awesome. It sounds like quite the journey. Lots of opportunities to learn along the way. Let's dive in a little bit more to the farm side of things before we talk more about the butcher shop, because I'm excited to learn more about that. I'm not very familiar with all the things that go into that. So I think people will be really excited to hear. So you said you guys started with chickens and you got into some dairy goats. What was the goal as you guys started acquiring more of those different livestock, and where were you planning to head with that? What was the kind of the trajectory?
My number one goal, I mean, growing up, we were pretty much poor. You know, we had a large family, not a lot of income coming in. And my main goal with the farm is to produce the best quality food I can for my family. We are at the point that we produce 100% of our own meats. We don't currently garden just because I am strapped for time. And as everyone knows that gardens, there is a lot. I mean, most people that haven't started gardening yet, they're like, oh, how hard can it be? It's just plants. It's not just plants. You got to weed and take care of it. And I don't have the time. I know I don't have the time. So I haven't gardened in probably 2 or 3 years. But my brother, he bought our old place and he gardens. So we just kind of trade. So that kind of works out for us. But yeah, the main goal was to put out the best quality food I could for my family. And then we started just raising extra food for family and friends. And it's kind of just slowly grown from there. I just have a passion on putting farm fresh products in people's tables. So
absolutely. It's always an interesting conversation when somebody says that they started homesteading or farming to feed their family, because it's a very different approach than starting a business. You look at things differently. You look at what's the quality of what we're going to eat, what variety do we ourselves want to have on hand throughout the year, that kind of stuff. And I love the conversation because I think it's different for everybody. But some people will say, I can't afford to eat our own meat because I sell it and it's more profitable for me to sell the meat than for us to eat it. And then some people are like, no, we eat it all ourselves and then we sell if we have extra. So what kind of led you to that kind of line of thinking of deciding that it was going to be for your family first?
When we started out, we only had 4 acres and probably a quarter of an acre was taken up by a pond. So we were limited on what we could raise anyway. And that my first goal going into it was just raising enough for my family. And then it kind of got into, okay, we have extras and we have the space to raise a couple more pigs or a few more chickens. And then in 2021, I have a tendency, I set goals for myself, and my goal was to own a larger piece of property so I could grow the farm by the time I was 30. And we hit that goal the year that I turned 30. I think we closed on the new property in the house 2 or 3 weeks before my birthday. So I was super excited, and it wasn't our current property we're on. It wasn't a farm. So we downsized on the animals. We kind of got rid of a lot of the stuff that I had, and I focused on just clearing pastures and getting fences up. And I do temporary fences until I get a lay of the land, because I've made that mistake before, spent a bunch of money on permanent fencing and it's not in the right spot, or you don't really, it's wet, and which I'm glad that we didn't do that here, because we have a lot of springs, natural springs and stuff. So now that I know where they're at, I'm going to redo some where my fences and stuff are. But yeah, that was the main goal. My first goal was to raise food for us. And then I kind of got to the point where, okay, I can take on a couple extra pigs, and then I don't go light on anything. So, and I'm a stickler for a good deal. My wife constantly hounds me about it, but the guy that I was buying my piglets from, I started out with fall piglets, which is harder up here, especially in New York with the winter weather and stuff. Western New York, we get hit pretty hard. But that's when the piglets were the cheapest. So that's when I kind of got into it. And the guy had a bunch of extra piglets, and he's like, I'll give you a great deal if you take all of them. So I think like the third year I raised feeder pigs, I ended up with 11. Like I went from 2 pigs to 4 pigs to 11 pigs really fast.
Yeah.
And, so it kind of just like, and I had a lot of interest in it, and I still do. Like last growing season, I raised 9 feeder pigs. So we just kind of slowly been growing as we get more business. I'd say 98% of our business is just family and friends.
Mm-hmm. Which is great. I mean, those are the people you want to feed most. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good deal. So you mentioned that you guys were on a property and then you have found a new property that you guys are on. What did that process look like for you guys? Land, especially for agriculture use, for one in New York, I'm sure is hard, but for two, as a first generation farmer, is excruciatingly hard. So what'd that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So, the first property we bought, it was just, like I said, it was 4 acres. It was a single wide trailer, just getting started out. We were just starting our family, young couple, and we got that paid off fairly quickly. So we had no mortgage going into it, and we didn't take a mortgage on it. We actually did that on a land contract. So we applied for the first time home buyers, and we qualified for that, which helped tremendously because we didn't have to come up with like the 20 or 30% down. And we bought right in the beginning where all the housing market started like skyrocketing. And it took us a little while. It took us probably 8 months to even come to this property. And it wasn't the property I set my eyes on, but we kept getting outbidded by other people. Like we were, bidding 10,000, 15,000 more than asking price. And we were getting outbidded on a lot of properties. And we ended up finding this one through a private sale. So that didn't happen. And we got lucky enough. But we went from 4 acres to our current property is 17 acres. The house is a little bit bigger, which we needed, and it has a guest cabin, and it had a small garage. It had no barn, no fencing. It was all overgrown. So I've just been slowly developing it, and we turned the garage into the barn for now until we can get capital to eventually build the barn down the road.
That's awesome. So that first one you guys found kind of, and then the second one was by private sale. Is that what you said?
Yes. Yep. We ended up going through the USDA for our first time home buyers, 0% down mortgage, which we qualified for a young couple that never had a mortgage before, and all the qualifications it set pretty good. And it's worked out fairly well for us so far. The goal was to use that and then refinance a few years down the road. Well, as everyone knows, we got the interest rates have skyrocketed. We got lucky and we locked in at a low interest rate, and we hit it like just as everything was really climbing. So right now, I don't think we could make it work, honestly, with the current interest rates and the way that I think our house appraised for $40,000 more than what we paid for it. And that was $40,000 more than what the previous owner paid for it was what we paid for it. So it's kind of been jumping up like crazy still. I think we're starting to hit like where everything's leveling out, but the interest rates are so high right now with the inflation and stuff. So yeah, we crazy.
I don't think it is enough about how like timing plays in so much to how much or how fast you can grow with some of these things.
Yeah. And like I talked to a few of my friends that have family farms, and they're just taking over their family farms about it. And I said, it's a blessing that you guys have, but also a curse. Cause I listened to a couple of people and talked to them because they're taking over what their family's done for generations. And they have like expectations from their family to uphold, where first time farmers, the families, some family don't agree with it. There's always that struggle, but you can pretty much take your vision and run with it as long as you have capital to work with and a little bit of money into invest and stuff. Because what's the running joke? If you want to make $1 million as a farmer, start out with 2 million, something like that. It's a very tough industry to get into, especially as a first generation farmer, because especially, right now everything's rising. Equipment, right now the cattle market's crazy high. So you're not going to jump in and spend pennies. I just happened to get in at the right time to obtain some of the livestock I have and the land that I have, to make it slowly start working. I mean, we're not profitable yet, but we're heading in the right direction now. And I think opening the butcher shop and actually building an actual business on the property has kind of changed my mind into more of a turning the farm into a profitable enterprise versus just as the homestead and doing smaller scale too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting you bring up the kind of difference from first generation versus multi-generation farms. Because it's a blessing and a curse, no matter which one you're in, because there's challenges and blessings with both of them. But I think it's really interesting that, and part of the reason I like talking to people who are, starting out on their business and learning from you guys, because a lot of those guys who are multi-generational, the opportunity for discovery and learning and trying new things is just so limited, because they do have those family expectations or this is the way it's always been done. I mean, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing in some cases. Mindset, and not even a mindset, but just there's no reason to test the norm sometimes. Yeah. So when there's people like you who start out and do this, it's really cool to watch, because you're doing everything for the first time your way, and you try things differently. You see things differently. So there's a lot to be learned, I think, from the generation that's done it, but also from the generation that's coming in and doing it for the first time. I love that. The other thing I wanted to point out that you said is a struggle of first generation farmers that I don't think it ever even crosses people's mind. What you said about the permanent versus temporary fencing, you guys had to get on your property and kind of see the lay of the land, spend basically a whole year, if not more than that, there to really know how the layout needs to be. And people who have farms passed down to them just don't face that, because they've been there their whole life. People can tell you, oh yeah, there's that spring over there. This spot always holds water. And you guys have to learn that all the first time before you can really invest in that infrastructure.
Yeah. And it's tough because depending on what time of year you look at your property when you're buying it, you don't catch everything. Like a lot of the stuff that I've listened to over the years and all the people I followed, like that was one of the biggest things. And I'm lucky. A lot of certain people don't like learning new things. Like they have a hard time with it. And I'm from a young age, I think I was like 15, 16 years old. There was an older guy that I worked with. And the one thing that he's like, the best advice I can tell you is never stop learning. He's like, you never can know enough and you never know more than the next person. And I took that to heart. And I feel, even though I'm a business owner now and I've been doing it for almost 10 years on my own, like homesteading and transitioning into the farming, I'm always looking to learn more on both sides, on the processing and the farming. And I'm always trying new things. And I'll take a lot of my farming methods have come from multiple other people's methods, and I mash them together. And what works for me, but it's not necessarily going to work for my neighbor down the road, or someone in another state. And that's what I really try to emphasize that to people, that everybody's farm is going to be different no matter what. Like everybody's going to do something different. So I just take little bits and pieces and I try it for myself. It doesn't work. But if it does, great. Put it in the the mashup of all the different methods that I use. And I try to farm as regenerative as possible too. Like I do rotational grazing and I do the pastured pigs and all my poultry out on pasture, weather permitting, and everything I do, I don't use chemicals for anything. I do use a little bit of grain, especially at milking time, because we have multiple varieties of dairy animals and stuff. And sometimes they're just temperamental if they don't get it. And if you don't get the right genetics too, which is a limited resource in certain areas. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great perspective. I had to chuckle a little bit there about your dairy animals being temperamental if they don't get their grain. I have a milk cow, and she is the sweetest girl unless her grain is not in front of her when she is being milked. If it's not there, if you try to bribe her with something else, it's like, no, this isn't it.
Yep. Yeah. We have 2 milk cows on top of our beef cows, and my Jersey just freshened this week. So it's getting back into the routine of milking. I built a new milk stanchion because I didn't have a milk stanchion before. I just tie her off to the post and she'd be able to sway around, kick. Like as soon as she runs out of grain, she'd kick the milk off. So I bought a set of cow kickers, and she's just very temperamental. I have a milking shorthorn on the other hand. I could throw a bowl of alfalfa pellets in front of her out in the pasture, sit on a bucket and milk her all day long. She's just the nicest cow. Jersey, on the other hand, but the trade-off is the quality of milk. I'm getting a lot more butterfat content out of the Jersey than I do out of the milking shorthorn. So I keep her around. There's been plenty of moments where I've considered selling her to somebody else and letting them deal with her because she can be very tough. But we do enjoy our raw milk, and having that raw milk is a huge staple for us. We have the dairy cows, and we also have Nubian dairy goats that we milk. So we have quite a bit of extra milk to play around with.
Yeah. Well, I'm very new to dairy. I've always wanted to have a dairy cow, and we just got one this year. And I was talking to my husband the other day about, like, temperament with dairy cows is really important because they could be on your farm for like 15 plus years, like longer than a dog, if you want to keep them around and keep letting them do their thing. But so temperament can make a real difference with them.
Yeah, I found that out the hard way. Like I said, I started dairy farming when I was 14 or 15 years old. I've been around dairy farms for 16 or 17 years now, for a long time. And I've been around all sorts of cows, and I've been lucky enough to have that opportunity to learn from other farmers that have done it for a long time. And I still made that mistake. I went and bought my first milk cow when we were on the other property, because I had dairy goats up until that point, and I wanted to make butter and not have to separate the cream out. And so I went and bought a milk cow, and I went to the farm and I looked at her, and she seemed calm and everything at the farm. Well, she got to our farm and she lost it, and she got loose from us, and we chased her around for 2 hours, and it was a nightmare. Well, I ended up putting her calf in the stall in the barn, and like I said, I've been around dairy cattle my whole life. Well, about 1 o'clock in the morning, cow came back. My wife woke me up, said the cow was back. She went to the barn, so I only had a lock on the outside of the barn. It was a small barn that I built out of repurposed lumber that I tore down from other barns, and I told my wife, I said, lock me in here. I'll put the cow in the stall and I'll come back to bed. Well, it didn't work out for me. She turned around and pinned me against the wall, and she went after me, and she never calmed down. So temperament is a huge thing. And for a first time cow owner, I highly, highly suggest, if you're a homestead level, buy from another homestead and go and milk the cow there, see how it interacts with them, and watch and listen and read as much as possible, because I was around cows my whole entire life and I knew what to look for, and I still made that mistake. And it's dangerous. Like, they're not a goat. Like a goat, yeah, it can booger you up and hurt you, but very slim chances that it's going to kill you. But that day, I thought she broke my knee. It was about the size of a volleyball when I got out of there. And luckily, I knew kind of what to do to get her off of me. But in those moments when you get attacked by a cow like that, it is what it is. And I think the biggest mistake was she just freshened. She was in a brand new place. We just chased her around, and she, like I said, she never calmed down after that. So I ended up having to sell her. So when we bought the new property and we got stuff cleared off, it took me 6 or 7 months to really clear fields out. We went and bought the Jersey cow I have now. Sweetest thing as could be, but once she had that calf is when she becomes temperamental. She's perfectly fine when the calf's not around, but as soon as her calf's around, she's a completely different animal. But she was supposed to be bred when I got her, but she wasn't. So I had her for almost a year before I got a calf out of her. So I worked with her a lot, and I can deal with her, but she does not enjoy my whites. And so I'm the only one that can take her in and milk her and safely and do what I need to. And she's fine. As soon as the calf starts mooing, she'll start kicking and thrashing around. And so it's like I said, my milk and shorthorn, I could do whatever I want with her all day long. And she's just like, yep, cool. As long as I got a little bit of feed and you're scratching me down, we're good to go. She's like the ideal family milk cow, but she doesn't like letting milk down because she loves nursing calves. She'll steal every calf off every cow out there, and she'll nurse 4 or 5 calves at a time. So there's challenges with that too. But yeah, the temperament's huge, and buying from a good breeder or another homestead that's had that cow for 2 or 3 years. Don't buy a first calf heifer, even though they say she's nice. From season to season, their temperaments can change too.
Yeah.
I mean, she might be good this season. You give her 2 or 3 months off, and she might come back completely with a different attitude because she had 2 or 3 months off.
Yeah.
So my advice with that too is keep the routine. Put her in the milk stanchion. Give her, even if it's a quarter of a cup of grain, just to keep her in that routine. Don't give her the time off, because as soon as you give them the time off, they tend to get lazy, and then you got to start that retraining process all over again. Well,
that's great advice. It makes me realize just how lucky we were, because we did buy a first calf heifer off of Facebook Marketplace from someone we never knew. We didn't even go to the farm that she was on. We met them somewhere, and she got off of their trailer and onto our trailer, and we went home, and she had her calf 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
So lucky that we have had good luck with her so far. But that's great advice, because this is her first calf. So when she does her dry period, we'll make sure we stick with the routine.
Yeah, even if it's every other day, just keep it kind of steady and consistent, because even with this Jersey cow, once her calf got big enough to keep nursing her out with the temporary fencing, I have a hard time keeping calves separate from the moms. So I just kind of said, we were in the middle of finishing up the butcher shop. I was like, I put them out on pasture and let the calf have the milk, and just let her wean them off herself. And I started training them like a month ago back to the new milk stanchion and stuff. But even so, she's still temperamental to deal with. So, but yeah, if you can keep the routine up and do it small scale, and it makes a world of difference. And even with first calf heifers, the people that have done it, if you could start training them as soon as you get them, or say you raise them from a bottle, put them in that milk stanchion, even if they're too small, lock the head in, give them that whatever type of feed you choose, a little bit of baleage or chaff hay or alfalfa pellets, whatever you choose for your animal. Train them that milk stanchion early and rub them down, play with the udder. That makes a huge difference. Huge difference. If you can get your hands on them every couple days, they're just automatically used to it. So when they come into milk, they might kick a little bit because it's new, and they might, dance around, but they're used to you touching their udder and having your hands between their legs and your head against their, side and stuff like that. If you can get them used to it at an early age, you're 20 steps ahead of the game than trying to come in out of a brand new fresh cow that they don't even know what's going on. That's the first time they had a calf. They don't know what milking is. They don't know what the calf nursing feels like. It does make a world of difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to try to keep, she had a little heifer calf that we're going to try to keep and raise her. So I should be paying you for mentorship right now. You're just giving me all the advice I need for her. That's perfect.
I'm so glad you could join us today. You can support the mission of the Farming on Purpose podcast and be part of the tribe dedicated to building ag legacies at farmingonpurpose.com/shop. You'll find apparel, office supplies, stickers, planners, and more, all inspired by the people living out ag legacies every day.
Well, you mentioned the butcher shop. There again. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you used to work at one, when did you kind of start thinking about, this is something I want to do myself? And you have a business partner too, right?
Yes. Yeah. So while I was working there, I always thought it would be neat, but I was happy there. So I was like, I'm not going to go start my own endeavor. And I decided to leave, and I didn't do it for a year and a half or so. And the big thing is the capital to start an endeavor like this. It's not a cheap business to get into. Building materials are high. We have single phase power. So single phase equipment is typically more expensive than a 3-phase equipment. So that was kind of holding me back. I did side work for people here and there, family and friends that, hey, we can't get this in the trailer. Can you come just help us out for the day? And I did that. So like I said, I had a passion for it. Well, my business partner, he approached us and he's like, hey, what do you think about opening a butcher shop? And we sat down and ran numbers and we're like, okay, this is what we think that it's going to cost us to put up the building and kind of get running. And of course, we were way off on our numbers because we weren't expecting some of the expenses of certain parts and pieces. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was something that I've always considered, but we just didn't have the capital and I didn't want to take out a big loan to do it. So having that business partner really is what set us up to actually make it happen.
That's awesome. Now, you called it a custom exempt butcher shop.
Yes.
Tell me what that means.
So custom exempt, we can only process for the person that owns the animal. Okay. So you go and buy a quarter, half whole, 3/4 of a cow or a half a pig or whatever. You're technically buying that animal alive from the farmer and you're paying me for the service of processing it. In New York, we also have a state inspection where we can buy in USDA processed slaughtered animals and we can put a little storefront in, sell it within New York state limits. And then there is USDA, which the facility I worked at was a full USDA facility, to where you have an inspector on site on slaughter and they come at them daily and you can process, you can put a storefront in, your customers the farmer can bring you the animal, have it processed into cuts and sell those individual cuts. We have considered trying to go that route after a new addition's done, trying to figure out what it's going to entail, but they make it very hard. They don't give you a lot of insight. They pretty much say, put up your building, put up what you're doing, apply for the inspection. We'll come and inspect it and tell you everything you have wrong and what you have to do to fix it. Well, it's very expensive to put up, I don't have this exact numbers of what we have invested in the building and stuff right now, especially with the new addition, but we have a lot of money invested. So to invest that kind of money and then have someone come and say, this is all wrong, you got to redo it after you already invested, it's kind of hard. We would like to go USDA eventually, but we're not sure if or when that's going to happen. So we're sticking with the custom exempt right now. That it's a lot more flexible. You have an inspector, they come out and inspect just the facilities once a year. You do a water sample, and this might change state to state. This is what we do have to do for New York. So we have a water sample. They come out and inspect the cleanliness of the facility, your handling equipment, make sure you're handling the animal safely and humanely. And that's basically it. They want to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And then it doesn't always work out like that because a lot of processors know they're only getting inspected once a year, but it's random. So you don't know. They don't call you ahead and say, hey, we're stopping over this week. Mm-hmm. So you have time to clean. Me being trained in the USDA side of it, I set my standards to USDA. All my cleaning is done per USDA standards. My sanitizing, I keep my equipment, and maintenance on your equipment's inevitable anyway. If you don't do it, and as expensive as it is, it's going to break. So I have a maintenance schedule on all my equipment to make sure I change the blades out every, however often they need it. And I do all the work here by myself right now. I'm the only, my wife helps with the books, and we have an accountant that kind of goes over everything, but I do most of the booking. I do all the customer related stuff. I do all the slaughter, cut, wrap, package. I do all the maintenance and fixing the equipment. Everything's that I do it all solely myself right now. Hopefully we'll have an employee in the future. We just got to get to the point where we're booking enough dates to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's got to be, I would think, a good business to get into with the rise in homesteading that we're seeing and the challenge that people are facing with not being able to book slaughter dates at their lockers. I've seen some that are booked out 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't even have that animal yet, It's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, this year's been kind of an exception to the rule because it got really busy during COVID. Mm-hmm. We've seen a lot bigger influx of people wanting to homestead or raise their own stuff because they weren't getting in the stores. And I think that honeymoon stage is kind of over for a lot of people. Like, they actually realized how hard it really is to live this lifestyle and have a farm and have animals that rely on you on a daily. And I think people are kind of taking a step back from it, but also with the rising cattle prices, at least around here, a lot of our local farmers are taking their animals to the sale barns right now because their mindset, and I deal with a lot of, of our local farms now that I open up processor, and their mindset is, well, we could take this just weaned cow and sell it for way more than we've ever been able to sell it for. We don't have to raise it for another year and a half. So we did get slow this spring. That's why we decided to do the new edition, but we're starting to get pretty busy for the fall. I think it's going to be it fluctuates with the times. And I've heard a lot on the pages that I follow and other processors, people that got into it, these new places have gotten into it during COVID. They got so used to that high influx of customers that they're really hurting right now, where we're getting into it on the low side. So hopefully, we're making it work on the low side. We'll definitely be able to make it work when we start really picking up pace.
Right, that's good.
It's a customer service business. And that's, the one hard thing with that is you're relying on farmers and people to have animals for you to process. So you're totally relying on someone else for your business to be successful. I guess that's most business. You're relying on other people. When you own businesses, you're relying on somebody else to have an income base. So it's tough, especially being, this is my first real business that I started. There's a huge learning curve with that. Taxes and legalities and inspections and who to call for this and who to call for that. So coming into it, I was very naive on, I'm going in to cut meat. That's what I love to do. Well, a bigger part of my job now is phone calls and scheduling and paperwork, all this stuff that I really don't enjoy doing. I have to do that first. The cutting part is kind of secondary right now.
I think that's one of the hardest things about scaling or growing a business is that you don't get to do the stuff that you love as much as you thought you would. You have to deal with all the other pieces. And even hiring someone to manage those pieces is really hard because none of them, it's hard to find people that care about it like you care about it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, if you don't have something invested into the business like your own, there's never going to be someone that cares about your business more than you care about your business and making it work. You might have that unicorn employee that comes in and manages it kind of like that, but even, they need days off. Like right now, I'm 7 days a week between the farm and the butcher shop, and I'm at the butcher shop 7 days a week, usually just returning phone calls and getting paperwork done and making sure products cut when it needs to be cut and maintenance and cleaning and the whole 9 yards. And then on top of that, I'm trying to keep up with the farm. So this year we're kind of pulling back. We're trying to keep our farm where we're at. We're not growing, and we're downsizing a touch on some of the stuff because we breed our own pigs now. I just sold a couple bred sows just because I haven't had the time to really build more. We're so wet right now. I normally farrow out in the pastures, but it wouldn't have been a good thing if I did. So I brought the pigs that I had farrowing in the winter over, into the barn, but even my barn keeps flooding. There's always challenges to farming. You're never gonna, what happened last year is not going to be the same as this year. You can't look forward. You can plan ahead, but it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with farming too, is you gotta be very, very flexible because there's nothing's ever going to go 100% the plan. And when it does, you take that as a feat and move forward. Like you can't be like, oh yeah, this is great, because it just, I think 2 weeks ago, I was trying to hold my cows off the pasture till the grass got a little bit taller. And once they've seen the green grass on the other side and you're using a single strand of fence, they weren't staying in. And I was in the shop trying to work, and my wife's calling me, you got cows in the road. And it was a very frustrating day because a lot of things, like we had just started calving that weekend. We had a brown Swiss Charolais heifer that was raised by our milking shorthorn. We were going to train her to be our next milk cow. She calved first, and we ended up losing the calf, and we lost her. She had complications, and it's a very tough thing when you're that close to animals. Like, people are like, oh, especially me being a processor and a top vet, people don't think that you have a heart for the animals. And that's the biggest lie that I come across. Like, the hardest part of my job is slaughter day. I absolutely hate slaughter day. I hate doing it. But it's part of the farming, and it's part of my job that I make sure those animals are utilized and processed as humanely as possible. Like, I'm not going out there. I'm not beating on the animals like you see in these large scale operations. I'm not poking and prodding them. I don't even have electric cattle prods. Like, I don't believe in them. I have a little fiberglass fence post I tap them on the butt with, and to get them to move where I want them. And if they don't move, I do a lot of on the farm slaughters too right now, and which has gotten me a lot of business. But a lot of the farmers are like, oh, they're not cooperating. And I told them, I said, patience is key, because if I put a bad shot on that animal, it's stressful on them. It's stressful on me. And this job's going to get a lot harder, especially when they're running loose on pastures. And I think that's the biggest thing this job's taught me, was patience. Because I lacked that big time before I got into this profession. Is I didn't have patience with the animals. Like, when I want them to do something, I want them to do it. And pigs, if they don't want to do it, they're not doing it. You're not pushing a 600-pound pig to do anything. I mean, they'll run you over and throw you out of the way. Same thing with cattle. And people don't realize how strong the animals are when they get into it either. So it's very hard when people look at farmers and look at processors that way, because I am both. Like, and I have that being both. It makes me kind of unique in the processing side, because I have a lot of my farmers that they're like, we don't have that in other processors. They don't understand, like, we want our animals handled this way. We want them taken care of this way. And me being a farmer first and a processor second, kind of gave me that outlook. So that's how I handle everybody else's animals. And I try to give them the best care while they're in my facility as I possibly can. Inevitably they're going for food. Everybody knows that there's ends to it, but while they're here, I try to keep them as comfortable and calm as I possibly can.
That's incredible. An incredible asset as a business owner too, I'm sure. I didn't really plan on talking about this today, but as you were kind of discussing that, I can just sense the undertones of, this is a mentally taxing job. Yeah. There are so many things that are out of our control. You mentioned flexibility is key, patience is key, and that's all stuff in your head. Like, that's stuff that you have to be in charge of for yourself. Yeah. Most people who are in ag do not have any kind of training or experience or tools that they are taught to deal with that ever. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're starting to see some of that change as we're seeing more of a focus on mental health. But it's an incredible issue. Is that something that you have any tools that you've learned to kind of deal with that? You mentioned that you didn't used to have a lot of patience. What's kind of helped you figure that out?
Time and age, I want to say, is big. But also, that's a very good point, is they don't have the tools. Growing up in rural America, especially if you're already in a farming family, or, I grew up with, you didn't talk about your feelings. You didn't discuss it. You pretty much bottle up. And I think I've recently heard a lot more people talking about mental health and farming. There's a couple podcasts I can think of in that I just listened to in the last few weeks. One's local here to me. And then, Joe Salatin has his podcast that they just started touching base on mental health, which is huge, because as a man in agriculture, and I'm sure it goes for women too, but for me, in my perspective, I looked at searching for help, and anybody just talking to someone in therapy and stuff it was a sign of weakness. And I ended up breaking down, and I did start going to therapy for a while. And it was a huge game changer for me. Mental health is probably in agriculture is probably one of the biggest things that people deal with. And you don't even realize it because most people are tough. If you think about it, a lot of farmers, and not just farmers, but ranchers and homesteaders, like, you deal with a lot on a daily basis, especially the people that are trying to hold down a full-time town job on top of dealing with it. The mental health thing, like, definitely. And you don't have to tell people about it. Like, go seek help, find someone that, you can talk to, even if it's a friend or a buddy, that just sit down and be honest with them. Because especially if you have friends in the same area on the farming and stuff, like, just if you end up opening up and being honest with it, like, I've got a friend right now, I can go and talk to him about anything. Before, we've known each other since high school, and this was just recent in the last 5 years. Once we kind of opened up and kind of discussed it with each other, I can call him about anything, right now, and he'll pick up the phone. If you can find that one person for you that you can just call and get it out there, it's huge. It's huge on the mental health, because you bottle it up, and I still have a tendency to do it. I'm not, I have days where it's bad, and I get super frustrated and angry, and you're like, I don't understand why I keep doing this to myself. And if you don't talk to somebody about it, it will defeat you eventually. Like, it's just a given. And I think that, like, I have a podcast that I'm on weekly, and me and my friend Kyle do it. We talk about that often. Like, homestead or farming burnout is a huge thing. If you're getting into it, plan for that ahead. A lot of people don't, and within a year's time, they're like, wow, this is way too much. Like, It's a lot more work than I thought. And, you got to plan ahead for that. So definitely, therapy, just talking to a friend or a family member, your spouse, don't keep it away from them and keep it to yourself. That's probably the biggest mistake you'll make, I think.
Yeah, I think it does require a moment of vulnerability to go ahead and have that conversation. But, we pride ourselves on, like you said, toughness or resiliency, grit. If you have the courage to be vulnerable for just a moment, then you become a much more resilient person from that. And I think that's how we have to look at it. We are making ourselves more resilient, able to handle more of the things that are taxing us every day by doing that.
Yeah. And you have to realize that everyone's human. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to stress about stuff. You're going to have anxiety, and to be able to come out and say, I need help with this. Once you start doing it, it's like, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I find someone to talk to sooner? And I kept it bottled in for years. Just in the last 2 or 3 years, I really started, like, I seeked out help. I got that help, and it helped me communicate with my wife a lot better. I found that friend that I can go to and talk to now. So yeah, that's probably my biggest piece of advice. Like, if you're feeling that way, find help, find a therapist that you can talk to, a friend, your spouse, just sit down and talk to them, because if they're a decent person, they're going to either relate with you or at least understand where you're coming from, and communication between you and that person is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this is a podcast, so most folks are listening right now. They don't know Joseph. I can see him here. He is a burly guy wearing a camo hoodie, and he is a butcher. So if he can go to therapy, I think just about anybody can go and not take a hit to their ego.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's important you share that too, because folks get stigmatized.
I didn't share it for a long time. Like, I was ashamed of it but once I noticed how it was helping me, and I hear this a lot, like the one podcast that I listen to quite frequently, like, now that I'm in the shop by myself, I got into listening, and that's how I stumbled across yours. Is I actually seen it through Tiffany Baxter, Backyard Butchery. I've done a few podcasts with her and stuff, and so I stumbled upon yours. So I listened to yours and a few others, and the one that's local to me, they talk about that, a lot, mental health, and they have, he goes to therapy and stuff like that. So just seeing that and getting that out there to people, I think it's opening the doors to our generation as first generation, but our generation age-wise as farmers, is like, wow, this really isn't a bad thing. Maybe we should try it. And if you feel ashamed about it, I get it. I did. Like, do it secretly. Like, don't tell anybody. Just go. Like, the therapist can't say anything to anyone. And once you get your feet in under you and actually see how well it's helping you, maybe you'll be able to share what's happening with you and your story with others and inspire them to, make that next step in doing it too. So,
yeah, it's incredible how much your mindset can shift just from one conversation, and have it opened up from things that you didn't even know you were looking at that way until you had a conversation about it with somebody. Well, those sound like great tools. Do you mind dropping the names of those podcasts that you listen to?
Yeah. So the one was Joe Salatin. They just came out, and his is Beyond Labels. Mm-hmm. And then the other one, their farm name is Yankee Beef. They're big on TikTok and stuff, but their podcast is Full Disclosure Farming. And they do a lot on mental health and stuff, and they're raw, they're true, like that. So, and they're unfiltered, like just to be aware, like if you're kind of sensitive on stuff like that, but they have great content, and it's been super helpful for me, and they're local to me. So it's kind of nice seeing that, when you connect with people that you don't know, that's only, within an hour from you, it's like, oh, cool, they're doing that also. So yeah.
We'll drop the links to those in the show notes. That's awesome to have those as resources. Mm-hmm. I spend quite a bit of time on TikTok, and it always amazes me that, like, the people I haven't heard of, like, I haven't heard of them, and I'm going to go check them out now. But I'm like, how is this possible? Like, agriculture is not that big, where it's a small industry in terms of people, big industry in terms of everything else, but small in terms of people. How are there so many people I haven't come across yet? So I'm always excited to meet new folks.
We just got on TikTok. Like, we just started. My friend that I do the podcast on weekly, we started our YouTube channel about a year ago. It's super small. I try to keep up on it, but sometimes life gets busy and you don't get all the content you want. And he's been hounding me for months to do TikToks, and he's great at editing. Like, he does a lot of the funny stuff with the farming side of it. But just a couple weeks I've been on TikTok, there's a lot of small farmers and stuff that I just started talking to and following and seeing their content. So the social media for me was like, I don't know if I really want to put myself out there, but now I look at it as I want to use what I know to help other people. That's my main goal in doing it. Like, I want to encourage people to either do it or show them how I'm doing it, and they can take bits and pieces of what I do, and maybe that'll help them, in their small farm or homestead or even a big farm. I don't know. I don't know who all watches my content. So that's my main goal with doing it. So, and then connecting with others has been great. Some of my, like Kyle, he's Backwoods Butcher. He's one of my best friends now. I've known him for probably close to a year, and we've become great friends. It's his podcast that I'm on.
And what's the name of that?
Meet the Critters. We stream it on both of our YouTube channels. That's Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. It's live on YouTube. And we try to keep it casual. We interview farmers, ranchers, other content creators, other processors. We try to get a lot of local people in, even if they don't have social media. Just be for that fact. We want to put out the best quality content to help other people. Yeah. So
that's awesome. Well, dang, I wish you would have told me. I'd have checked it out. So I'll have to check it out now.
Yeah. Like I said, every Saturday night. And then it's, we're on most of the podcast platforms too. You can go and listen to it. So
awesome. Well, I want to circle back to one thing that you said, when you were talking about the kind of the rise and flow of the fluctuation of business, the cattle market right now. I think it's something very interesting that most consumers are not aware of, that a lot of them, have been pushed to or have realized they want to start doing some of their own, or they want to buy local. But cattle producers right now are faced with this huge dilemma of, do I sell local where I'm not potentially going to get quite as big of a profit margin as if I went to the sale barn when the market's this high? And we don't ever think about that as consumers. When you look at your business as a business, it's a really tough decision to sit there and make that call.
It is.
What have you guys been doing in conversations with folks that are still butchering for their family or for their local customers versus going to the sale barn?
So I've had a lot of my recent conversations have been with the farmers, because another thing that I do through the butcher shop is I started a customer and farmer list to connect customers and farmers together, because I seen a huge need for that. I have farmers that have multiple animals available, but they don't have the customer base to sell it. And then I had customers that were looking for stuff also. So a lot of my farmers are taking their cattle to the auction and capitalizing on it. And my advice to them is, by fall, store prices for beef and everything, the pork and poultry and everything else kind of fluctuates with, they all kind of move together, because that's how large industry works. They're going to be like, oh, we can raise the cattle prices because this, we can raise the cost of beef in the store. We're going to bump up pork and chicken and everything else that goes along with it. So I've been telling them, I'm like, we know that it's coming and it's slowly starting to get there now. If they can keep their cost kind of similar through the year, and they can keep a few of their animals, because with all the local farms that are selling their cattle right now in the auctions and they're going to these large feedlots, there's going to be store-bought prices are going to skyrocket. That's a given. We've got bottle calves, day-old Angus Holstein Cross bottle calves selling almost $1,000 a piece. That's never happened before. They were $100, $200 max. So you take that calf that might die by the time they get it home, and they buy a tractor trailer load. Back when they were $100 or $200 a piece, it probably wasn't as big of a deal. Like, they could soak it up into what they made off profit. Well, now they're spending $700, $800, $900, $1,000, $1,100. I heard of some of them going upwards of $1,200 for this couple-day-old bottle calf. That's a long-term investment for these people that are, feedlots and veal barns and stuff like that. We're going to see a rise in meat prices in the store for a long time, and they probably won't come back down. So I'm trying to encourage my farmers to keep their prices at least where they're at. If they have, I understand if they have to raise them up because everything's getting higher, but if they can keep them where they're at, they're going to sell. We're going to see a lot bigger influx of people looking to their local farmers like we did during COVID when it wasn't available, coming up. And if they can hold on to some of their cattle, finish them out, and keep their prices fairly reasonable, that's going to be a huge thing for the farmers and a huge thing for the customers that are looking for it. But I can see where farmers are selling out a lot of their feeders right now, and local stuff is going to be limited, and store-bought stuff is going to be so high. I worry about people being able to afford it.
Yeah, that's great insight. I think anytime, if you have the ability to diversify, take some of them to the sale barn. Don't take all of them. Take some, so you can get some of that extra profit margin, but keep your business, consistent, and do the things you need to stay in business and keep those local customers, so you don't just lose that opportunity when the market changes again, because we know it's going to.
Yeah. And I follow politics a little bit here and there, and I try to stay up on it, but I try not to get into it too much because I get frustrated like the next barber about it. But I don't know. I just feel like it's another push on there's been a huge battle on getting away from eating meat in our country. So I think, with this, that it is very enticing to take your cattle to the sale barn and capitalize on it now. But I do agree, and that's my advice to the farmers: sell some and try to keep some, because you're not going to regret it. Like, you'll be able to sell everything you have. You're not going to be sitting on it like some of our farmers are now, because the biggest complaint I have right now with my customers is either it's hard for them to pay for that much meat all at once, or they don't have the storage for that much meat all at once. So any people that might be listening to the podcast that don't raise their own stuff, they buy from local farms, or they're thinking about it, buy a new freezer. So you have the room, and then try to link with your local farmers right now, and tell them that, yes, we are interested in a fall. Offer deposits, like even if they're not requiring a deposit, offer a deposit. That just gives them more incentive to hold on to those animals. I think, if they have deposits down, because a lot of times I've done it a lot. I require deposits on all my animals I raise now, because I've had people back out at the last minute and leave me in a tough spot where I was looking forward to having that income. And before I process my own, I'd send, everybody knows how hard it is to get into processors. I couldn't change that date. So now I had to find freezer room at my own house for extra animals that I wasn't planning on. And I had to pick up that bill to the processor that I wasn't planning on having. So, I started requiring deposits for everything I raised, because even if they back out, at least I had some money to put towards the processing, and
yeah,
it kind of helped.
Yeah, give you a little stability there. That's good. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I have no idea what I'm going to name this episode, because it's been such a breadth of topics. But I just kind of want to wrap up with, if, you've given us some great advice already, but if there's one thing that you've learned the most that you want other people to be able to take away from your experience, what would it be?
The biggest thing is definitely the mental health thing that we talked about, for sure. Like, even if you're just getting into it, plan ahead for it, because it's going to happen. Anybody that has animals know how frustrating it can be. They have a mind of their own. They're not doing exactly what you want them to do. No matter how well they're trained, how well behaved they are, there's going to be times where they get loose, or so they get sick and die. It's hard. It's hard as a farmer when you put that much time and effort into something, you care about something that much, and stuff like that happens. And then also, always be willing to learn something new. That's probably the biggest thing that's helped me. Don't think you know enough about anything. Always seek out a learning opportunity. Always seek out, I still go to grazing classes. I still watch videos on how people are building fences, even though I've built thousands and thousands of feet of fence, because there's always a new technique or a new way that I might not know, and I'll try it. Different ways of feeding animals, different ways of just everything. So yeah, that would be my two major things: being flexible, learning new stuff, and staying on your mental health.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story, sharing all the things that you got going on. I'm excited to watch on TikTok as things continue to develop, and we'll drop the link to the podcast that you're on so we can let people find you there. Anywhere else people can find you online?
Yeah, so we have a Facebook page under Blakeslee Acres. We have our YouTube, Blakeslee Acres. The TikTok is also Blakeslee Acres. And then the Meet the Critters podcast is streamed on Blakeslee Acres YouTube channel and on Backwoods Butcher at 603 YouTube channel. And then that is also then transferred over into audio on multiple platforms. I still haven't got the list from Kyle yet, but I'm pretty much on every major podcast platform that you can get podcasts on. Awesome.
Great. Well, look forward to listening to you, and thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun, and I really enjoyed it.
If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.